everyone, it's Laura here at Hyperstamper. I'm so glad you are joining me. I want to show you a fairy themed junk journal. Now this will be the last one I make for a while because I used up almost all of my fairy ephemera that I had left on this one. And this was a commissioned piece, somebody who really wanted the last one I put out and just didn't quite catch it in time. So I made this one special for her. She wants to give it to her daughter. Shh. So it's almost the same cover as the last one because it's from the same story. Also from 1920, and the beautiful illustrator on this lovely cover is Winifred M. Ackroyd. And you can see the little girl here peeking over the hilltop here, and she sees the fairies dancing by the lake. And that's actually what it says down at the bottom here. It's absolutely stunning original plate. And then I've got these great vintage beads that I threaded to match that cover. And this is vintage crochet, part of a doily here that matches perfect. The book itself is from 1937, and it is one of the University of Knowledge's. So let's take a little look inside of this so you can see what this beautiful fairy journal has inside. And everything in here is fairy themed ephemera or close to it. And we'll start with this teeny tiny mini journal here that I put in. I put in some pretty little antique pages here with some chantilly lace and feathers because reminded me of fairy wings, and that's just a really special little one. That's of course a Cecilia M. Barker illustration there from the 70s, so it is vintage. And then I've got an even older one coming up. This is beautiful, also from the 1920s, called a story called Fairy Soap. Isn't that fantastic? I just love it. And some little child over the last 100 years has colored in some of that picture there, which I love. And there it is. I didn't cover it because it has the fairy story, but she can cover it. I've got another little mini feather here from my garden and some more vintage chantilly lace. And I pulled this out of an antique book, F for Fairy. And then this here is pretty cool. I got a whole bunch of these pages here from an antique book. Probably about 20 of them because they were for every new chapter. And what I did is I covered it with antique paper, here the words, and then I pulled the word fairy from an antique book. So I just think it's lovely. It's a great little insert. I attached actually the 1937 paper from this original book here for journaling. I think it's beautiful. So I'm going to make more of those with those pieces. I've got a Pearl Shop receipt in there, and I've got a an unusual vintage card because you don't often see these circle ones that are vintage. That one's from the 70s. And then this beautiful little snap card, and that is also from the 1920s. And the theme there is that they're just pretty like our fairies are. And over here, I've got, oh yeah, that's that there. And then this is from the children's book from the 1930s, and it's a surprise for the elves. Now this here, hold on, come back, is from this antique box here of library plates. Very, very old. And I really do think of butterflies when I think of fairies. So these are very rare, and it's a very special treat. And that came from that same dust cover from that giant nature book that I have, vintage book. And then this here is one of the most beautiful plates. It's a famous plate here from a very famous author, and it's by Charles Robinson, who does a lot of fairy themed illustrations, and that one's 1913. Christmas in Fairyland, the butterfly there, and then Through Fairy Halls here from 1927. And here's one of these beautiful vintage Cecilia M. Barkers, and this one is The Wayfaring Tree Fairy. Look how pretty this one is, just so gorgeous. I usually save these for covers, but I really wanted her to have one of the Cecilia M. Barkers. And this, believe it or not, is a vintage paper doily that I got. It was new in its package from the 1960s. The lady just never did open them, and she gave me that, and I was thrilled. Here's just a wonderful little story page from the 1950s with all these little elves in here, or pixies. And then we've got vintage ledger page here because I just wanted some more color, so I added that. More butterflies up here out of antique paper, an unused journaling card or an index card. And then this is a 1923 Stickum book back cover. So it's a really nice heavy cardstock so that I could lay down this gorgeous vintage embroidered doily with the hand tatting lace on the edge. It's stunning. I love it. And then I put this Beatrix Potter 1930s plate in here because it reminded me of the countryside and a very pretty place where I think fairies would like to live. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. And more of that, another antique paper flower here. And there is a leprechaun, not a fairy, but a magical little guy. But on the other side here, we've got these, as you can see in the sky there, the fairies flying about with the music and dancing to the musicians. I think that is so beautiful. Another through fairy halls. And then this here is from another children's book from the chapter Fairies and Elves. And we've got a fairy's child there, brownies, more brownies, pixies, all kinds of fun stories there. Now this here, I put the bees down here, this pocket from the 1930s children's book. And because look at their wings, look almost exactly like fairy wings. And that's how Cecily M. Barker would illustrate hers, sort of these beautiful bee wings, butterfly wings. And then this here again, just reminded me of a very pretty place where you would see fairies in the countryside. And this is the oldest postcard. Well, I no longer own it. The woman who is getting this journal owns it, but it's from 1901. That is the oldest one I have. And it is very special. I love it. I hope she does too. And then this here is from the early 1920s. And we've got the fairy there giving the rabbit a little kiss. Isn't that beautiful? I love it. And this here is from a very old book. Believe it or not, it's from the 1890s. And it is fairies. I believe it was called Fairies and Fables. And this one here is just a beautiful little fairy who thinks this bat is a funny kind of bird. So that's a very sweet little story. There was only 2 illustrations in the book, so I scooped one over here. And here is a vintage postcard from Spain of a castle, because we know there are fairy godmothers in castles as well. And then, of course, I just picked this beautiful page from the early 1900s that had these beautiful illustrations of trees and bulbs and galls that grow on trees where the fairies also live. This is just a magical little piece here and a story about a fairy, as you can see there. And look at how enchanted that is. It's just really special. And I don't know if you can see it, but there is the fairy there. She's hard to find, so it's another one of those find the fairy kind of games. Then here is a song from an antique book called The Mermaid, because as you know, there's mermaids, fairies, and unicorns. That's the threesome that make up the enchantment. And then this is a Christmas journal I just made, Snowberries, but there was a poem in it called Fairy Folk. So I had to include that as well. You don't often find poems about fairies, so that's quite special. This here is it's a beautiful plate. It is from the early 1900s, and it came out of a book called, oh my gosh, is it The Wonder Years? And it is called the Homes of the Rainmakers. And the Rainmakers are the fairies that make the rain. And look at their little mushroom homes here. It's a famous illustration. You can Google that. It's you can buy the plate itself on eBay or Etsy, and they have some value to them. So I didn't do too much to the back just in case she wants to take that out and frame it. Here's a sweet little 1940s children's book page. This little girl is dressed up for Halloween as a fairy. It was a common, and kind of still is, common costume. Now, look at this. This was the cover of a book, and it has this little girl on it, and the book was called The Sewing of Danny, I think, S-O-W-I-N-G. And what I did is this is the original, you can see because there's an embossment around her, but it's the original photograph on there. And what I did is I took my butterfly piece here, vintage butterfly, and I cut it out and turned that little girl into a fairy. I hope she likes it. I think it's adorable. And then this here is a 1951 yearbook diary. And it did have some writing in it. A new mom wrote the weights of her babies every day for a while. Now this is, I chose this one June 24th because it is International Fairy Day. I kid you not, I looked it up. I just typed in, is there an International Fairy Day? And there is, and it's June 24th. So I'm pretty excited about that. And then this little elves here. And we've got more little pixies down here as well. Look at how sweet that is. This is so old, from the 20s. And then a little story about kittens on the other side. I didn't want to cover it up because it's too cute. And then another one here from the 1920s. Look at that little elf man. He is hilarious. I've had a few of these, and fables and fairy tales up here. Elf and the Dormouse. Some great journaling space. Another My Book House page. I love that, #1 antique piece of music. And then just some little pieces of ephemera down here that she can journal on. This beautiful piece here of a mermaid. Can you see that? Look how beautiful that is. She is stunning. And then we've got more elves down here looking for their small homes for the bugs. And that brings us to the end. I hope she loves it as much as I loved making it. I'll be back tomorrow with a new journal, hyperstamper.etsy.com. And don't forget to subscribe. Bye for now.